Welcome back, everyone, to Hearts of Iron 4, not Hearts of Iron 4, Victoria 2. It's not early in the morning, it's 9:40 a.m., but I suppose it is the first thing I'm doing today. So, yes, forgive me for my sins. Anyway, it looks as if the Frenchies are up to stuff. So basically, the French ambassador has arrived with the following demands. They wish the Ottoman government to recognize them as sovereign authority over the Holy Land in Palestine, turning control over all Christian sites to the French. The Treaty of Yes, signed with Russia in 1774, states that it's the Russians who do this. So basically they're entitled to protect the Christians, you know, it's like, yeah, whatever. If the Christians get mistreated or whatever, then they get the right to invade us. If not, it's just a prestige thing. And should we agree to the French demands, it will almost surely lead to conflict with the Russians. So we have two choices. Either Russia protects the Holy Land, of course, or we will not agree to the French demands. Now, if we do that, the French Empire gets the Ottoman Empire refuses to accept it. If we accept it, the Russians are angry, and we get the French escalation. They will not willingly give up those claims, and we're like, let them come if they may. And I'm expecting a French invasion that, to be honest, I'm not really that afraid of. Like, the French are much stronger than we are, but in this kind of war, I am almost certain that the Russians would support us. And plus, you know, the naval invasions with the AI aren't that interesting. And we get the Ottoman Opium War. We gain a cut down to size Casus Belli on the Zulu. Yes, because apparently Zulu is refusing our trade demands, and of course we also gain an add to sphere Casus Belli on the Zulu. How the hell I'm supposed to transport an army all over to Zulu? Nobody knows. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can just ignore that. Although, what I could have done, simply, is declared war on Zulu and called in Great Britain, my ally, and let Great Britain kill Zulu. That would have added them to my sphere, because the war goal is us to add them to sphere. Anyway, I have no idea. Then we're also still sort of doing a bit of a tug-of-war of influence over some countries. Now, Greece, I'm trying to sort of cuddle them so that they don't get cuddled by anyone else, so that we can eventually strangle them and kill them. And also we get the glorious state and government, which allows us to enact a few decisions, like the military reforms of Abdul-Majid I, which only lose one consciousness for officers. This is the thing, like, sometimes in Victoria 2 decisions just piss me off, because it's like, oh yes, the military reforms of whatever, and it's like, lose one consciousness. Also, the imperial anthem of the Ottoman Empire, which is quite cool, in my opinion, so I'll play it right now. I'm not sure if it's copyrighted or whatever. And we have a ton more decisions, like our claims on Montenegro. We gain a conquest Casus Belli on Montenegro. However, that is not a good idea. It's in the Russian sphere, and I'll be trying to remove it from that sphere as quickly as possible, so that we can mostly make our borders look better. We don't really gain anything by taking the final piece of Montenegro, because, to be fair, a lot of modern-day Montenegro is under our control already. I don't think we changed our border policies, because if we went into open borders, we'd bleed pops quite fast. So we don't want people emigrating. And we've got a ton more decisions. Now, the Ottoman Empire is great for one thing, or it's great for a lot of things, but it's pretty great in Victoria for especially a lot of the decisions that you get, because you control Egypt, the Holy Land, and Iraq, Mesopotamia. We also get a few nice decisions, like ending the autonomy of the Beylik of Tunis, which is going to annex them. And we need nationalism and imperialism to enact these decisions. So, and yeah, as you can see, also the end Wallachian self-rule. We need nationalism and imperialism. So we're just going to rush straight for that. And also Turkish tea, because of course, like right now in history, tea is only in China. It's only later that it spills out thanks to the British industrial espionage in southern China. And then they brought tea to cultivation in British India. And then it spread essentially to all the climates that can support tea cultivation, because it's really a good cash crop. Also get the glorious Ottoman potato blight, because apparently we have that. And next up is a pretty sad war. Now I'm allied with Persia, and the British are like, yes, we're gonna do the Anglo-Persian War. Now in this period in history, there was this thing called the Great Game. Also, Persia owns a piece of Afghanistan. Do you notice that? There's like one single like province, which is not usually what happens in Victoria. Usually, oh, it's like the Kermanshah seizure or something. Right, it's I think an event where they can get to seize an Afghan province. The Herat seizure, I think. I don't know, the Herat succession or something like that. Anyway, basically, during this time in history, you had this thing called the Great Game, where basically the British, who were starting to become essentially the dominant world power in most regions of the world, were getting increasingly worried that the Russians were somehow conspiring to end that and reach the essentially shores of the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean, which was a bit ridiculous. Now, a little bit less ridiculous is that they wanted to reach warm waters in general and reach a sort of hegemony in quote-unquote Eurasia. But, you know, wait, what? Anyway, I have no idea. Anyway, that war with Persia is really, really easy. Unfortunately, we have to turn on our ally, but for some reason, we get to keep the alliance later. Anyway, basically, this leads to a whole bunch of wars in the Middle East and in sort of Central Asia. That are sort of proxy wars between Britain and Russian allies, or between Russia and British allies. It eventually becomes a massive mess. Now, we also have the decision to conquer the Yemeni sultanates, although I don't want to do that quite yet. Like, I'm not talking about generally I should have done it, but I thought that, like, that could lead to conflict with the British, so I didn't, but I think I should have done it. And then we get the Tanzimat reforms, which is like a big subject that I really don't know enough about to really talk, but it was basically these Ottoman military reforms. And we get the glorious conquest of the Beylik of Tunis, and also diplomatic mission under siege in Bahrain. So by jingo, we're gonna go to war with Bahrain, even though we're already in their sphere, but I don't want to lose our 10 prestige and our influence, so yes, I guess we're going in. And I definitely overkill by sending 30,000 Ottoman screamers all the way to fucking a random island in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, and the Russian Empire has intervened on the side of Tunis. So this is what I was talking about in the last episodes, where once you start to revoke the autonomy of your beyliks and, you know, puppets and protectorates, great powers get events to intervene on their side. Now, thankfully, the British are my allies, and so we're not going to get intervened upon by the United Kingdom. And in fact, we can call them into this war. We're going to later do that. But damn, it is pretty sad. Also, oh my god, I just realized this. I should have taken this opportunity to attack Montenegro, because I'm already at war with Russia. Oh, I'm such a dumb fuck. Yeah, see, because spoilers, I never take Montenegro. Montenegro survives until the end of the game. At one point, I get into my sphere, but this was my chance. I'm such a dumb shit. I should have just taken that. Oh, well, I could have cleaned it up. Anyway, my basic strategy for dealing with the Russians is pretty simple. Our northern borders are very, very good in terms of being anchored to some good natural obstacles. There's the Black Sea, obviously. There's the Caucasus Mountains. Although the Russians don't actually like we're at war with Russia, but as you can see, like there's the borders on the map look different. Those are actually like Nayemniki, you know, basically like local governorates kind of thing. In the Caucasus, they're Russian puppets. I'm not sure why HFM decides to do that, but I don't know. They just have these Russian puppets there, instead of having it be under Russian control at the beginning. The Caucasus was a mess throughout this time. It wasn't really fully controlled by the Russians. There was an ongoing insurgency by the, you know, sort of both natives and non-natives that had later arrived, sort of the nomadic population that had been emigrating there in the centuries prior, but at this point was basically natives, you know, and the natives themselves, like the Circassians and Georgians and all that. It's pretty interesting chapter in Russian history that we don't really have time to get into. Now, Wallachia and Moldavia are my puppets, but they're the Russian spherelings. We could technically call them to war because they're our puppets, but it's not a good idea, really, because, you know, it's gonna expand the amount of territory that the Russians can use to invade us. Instead, oh, I get to call it in the UK, by the way. Instead, there's only the one province, Tulcea, or Tulcea. I'm not sure. I don't speak Romanian, but considering what I think the pronunciation is like, I think it's Tulcea, which is a marsh province, and marshes are really good for defense, so I can use that choke point to prevent the Russian numerical superiority from being too bad. Now, I'm getting attacked, and I'm being dumb, right? I should go look. Yeah, so as you can see, here they come. And I have one army there so that I don't take attrition, but I also have reserve armies because the Russian troops are better than ours in terms of teching. I'm almost 100% sure we haven't teched a single military tech. And because the Russians are going to be in bigger numbers, and because sometimes the AI probably cheats with dice rolls. And so it's pretty easy for my defensive line to be broken, and then, you know, we have open terrain, so I don't want that, and so, yeah. Actually, Constanta looks to be marshes as well from, like, the terrain sprites, but I'm not sure. I haven't clicked on it, and I don't remember from playing. So that's my basic strategy, to let the Russians sort of headbutt into that defensive wall. While, of course, this war is over Tunis, so the way wars in a lot of these games work, or especially in Victoria 2 works, is that you gain war score over time by doing things that, you know, make you win the war, like killing enemies, blockading ports, occupying provinces, and you get more war score if the provinces that you're occupying are the provinces that the war has been declared for, you know, the war goal, which makes sense, you know, unlike some other games where war goals don't really count. Anyway, so basically, I'm just going to let the Russians sort of headbutt themselves into Tulcea. And there's also a river crossing between Tulcea and Chisinau, which is the capital of Moldavia that the Russians currently occupy. And yeah, so as you can see, we have 10% war score, but the war goal requires a lot more war score. As you can see, there's like a little tiny arrow over there right near the end, and that means that we need to have like an 80% or something, because this is an annexation war, and annexation wars generally require a lot of war score. But if you're trying to annex a minor country, right, and a great power intervenes and they become the war leader, technically you should only peace deal with the war leader. But if you're attacking a minor country to annex them, if you fully occupy them, the war score goes up to 100%. And then you can just peace out and kill them. So my whole idea is I'm going to hold and then occupy the entirety of Tunisia, which is not going to take that long, and win. Now, I'm also mobilizing in case I need extra troops. Now, mobilizing, what it does is that it turns a bunch of your pops from farmers and laborers, and later on factory workers. We're already starting to get a decent amount of factory workers. As you can see, we have 13 industrial score, which is mostly, I think, counted on the basis of how many people work in your factories. Anyway, it turns those pops into soldiers, so obviously it reduces revenue because you don't have people farming anymore, and that gives you taxes, and it also increases expenses massively because you're having to essentially clothe and feed all these soldiers. So that is pretty disastrous for the budget, but to be honest, it doesn't really matter that much in this early game, because the amount of money that we're going to be spending on a mobilization in the early game, when the amount of pops that can be mobilized is very small, because the more techs you have, the more you can mobilize troops, especially in, I think, one of the military lines, because you have like more thorough mobilization plans or whatever. So gets higher, and so the expenses get higher, but at this point in the game they're not that high. Anyway, we killed the Bahrainis, and I didn't even realize that we pieced them out, but that's because we called in the British to war, and the British got called into all the wars. Anyway, as you saw there, we had to basically pour in all the armies, so if I hadn't mobilized, the Russians would have likely broken through Toussaint. I don't know exactly how like 1.5 Russian armies managed to nearly break through the entirety of my defensive front, but whatever. I get to attack them back, and I have a ridiculously strong attack general, Vefik Hoxha, clearly Albanian, and we just massacre them in Ismail. So they're sent home, sent packing. They're not gonna come back for a while, although, to be fair, there's 45,000 Russians coming in. And so we're gonna have to defend against that, but I can reorganize my troops, get a defensive general, which, to be fair, honestly, like, this is one of the most annoying things in Victoria 2, sorting out generals, and it's actually one of the most important. Like, you can win or lose wars by failing to essentially get the correct general for the correct job. It's really, really sad, and like every single little stack that gets spawned from mobilization has a chance to get assigned the general that you're looking for, because the way that the AI works is that it always there's an auto assign feature, obviously, for armies, because otherwise it's a nightmare. And of fucking course, it assigns the best general. So the general that you're looking for is likely commanding a random 3,000-man detachment that's heading to the rally point. Because it's mobilizing. I don't know, man. And we can add Moldavia to our sphere of influence. How amazing. Now, I should have revoked the autonomy right here and there. Because guess what? I'm already at war with the Russians over Tunisia. The Russians can't support Moldavia if... I'm just realizing the mistakes that I did, and, you know, it's also kind of why I like sort of winging things, because it's kind of boring to just win really, really easily. Anyways, it would have been a lot easier to do it this way, but as you'll see, there gets some interesting conflict over Moldavia and Wallachia. Okay, now Tunis is almost occupied, and I was checking around here to see if any like random Russian armies were deciding to do some big memes and invade me from an unexpected direction. The AI in Victoria 2 really loves to get military access through countries that you don't expect. Even countries in your sphere of influence. This is something that kind of angers me, that countries in your sphere of influence accept diplomatic offers from countries that are your enemies. It's like, yo, that's like exactly the opposite of why I have you in that sphere of influence. Anyway, like for example, in my India campaign, in my East India Company campaign, I was the East India Company and I got to war with Germany over some stupid reason, and Germany, or actually Prussia and then Germany, invaded me through like Russia. and some Central Asian countries, because they got military access for Russian Central Asian countries, and so they were able to send their entire army across Eurasia. So I'm checking if the Russians are doing something retarded like that, and thankfully they're not. Now, I'm doing the dumbs, right? A lot of these Yemeni sultanates are friendly with the United Kingdom, and so I don't want to conquer the Yemeni sultanates because I'm like, they're friendly with the United Kingdom is going to come in and protect them. But like, I'm dumb. I'm in a war together with the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom cannot attack me if we're in a war together. That's just not how Paradox games work. In fact, it's the exact opposite. I could have taken out all of the Yemeni sultanates right now. Except maybe the ones on my sphere, because maybe I can't remove them fast enough. I don't know, man. The mistakes. That's good enough, though. It's good enough. And eventually, obviously, they're gonna be taken over by the UK. I'm not sure exactly why the UK has such a hard-on for like some of the some of the sultanates and emirates on the Arabian coast, but definitely Aden they took over because, you know, center of trade and all that, and later on with Suez Canal, it was ridiculously important. But also even earlier, it was important as a sort of naval base to project naval power to India. Because guess what? This is about the time when steamers start to become relevant, and steamers require fuel. The fuel is not the wind, because earlier on you had sailing ships, right? And so the reason you have naval bases to project naval power across the world is that you want to give food to your crews. But that's not like entirely necessary. So you have weird shit happen, like Portugal, you know, going across the Cape of Good Hope and all the way into India and getting into wars with Indians, like very much overextended. And even like things like the Dutch East India Company setting up bases and all that in the East Indies. But when it comes to the age of the steamer, you need a ton more bases, right? And so that's what sort of leads into some of the 19th century colonialism and sort of the early imperialism, although I'm using imperialism as governments go conquer stuff and not like the exact definition of it, but whatever. So I decided to do a bit of a meme and create our own little Crimean War, because it looks like there was no Crimean War event in this timeline, so we didn't get to do a Crimean War, or the British and the French did not get to support me in a Crimean War. And so I'm like, what can I do? I can utilize this surplus of troops I've got from the mobilization to invade Simferopol and maybe add it to the peace deal, maybe just have a good meme. And so I decided to do that. Of course, in the meantime, I don't realize that I'm conquering the rest of Tunisia, and so, yeah, I'm basically gonna, spoiler alert, win the war in a little bit anyway. But, you know, just sort of practicing how naval invasions work out in this game for the wars to come. Anyway, going back to our this little discussion on naval bases. Like, the British have these territories all around the world randomly because at some point they realize, okay, so if we're gonna, quote-unquote, protect our trade to East Asia, of course to China mostly, which was becoming very important for the East India Company and thus for Britain, because the East India Company wouldn't have been profitable without the Chinese trade, you have that they start to set up all these outposts all around the world. And that's how it starts in a way. They had already done their sort of initial wave of colonial conquest, and because of that, and because of the need to protect what they had already, they snowballed into ever more missions, ever more conquests. And I find that kind of interesting, the sort of mission creep, partially induced by technology and partially induced by politics. Because again, another factor was to sort of quote-unquote curb Russian influence in places like Persia. It's like ridiculous. What am I doing to Kuwait? We're gonna get to annex Kuwait at some point through a decision, but I don't know. And What the fuck am I doing? Alliance offer from the Papal States. Okay. The glorious Papal Ottoman Alliance. What is this? Oh no, it was actually no, yeah. In the 30 Years' War, the Ottomans allied with the French, right? So yes, they did ally with the Catholics. I don't know. Wait, did they ally with the French or did they ally? Yeah, they think they allied with the French. I'm not sure. That's shit from like my, you know, third grade high school. So like in terms of American high school, it would be like 11th grade history textbook. I don't know. I never read like a proper book on the 30 Years' War, so I'm not really an expert on that. Anyway, we're not really that interested in European conflicts right now. We just care about the Russians being annoying. Oh, and where's the source of the Nile? This is really good because it's like a lot of our decisions, again, to sort of do excavations in Crete or something. It's going to give us a lot of prestige. And prestige is obviously pretty good because our military and industrial power, at least at the beginning, is subpar to a lot of countries that would like to become great powers, but our prestige is extremely high. And so prestige is going to be a very reliable way for the Ottoman Empire to sort of maintain its great power status, which is very important because that's the way you keep the sort of countries that you want to annex under your sphere and prevent them being protected. So, as you can see, I did not realize that we had conquered Tunisia, and what happened is the war score jumped up to 100%. The British AI, which was the war leader, and so it was in charge of negotiating peace, was like, huh, we won. And they just clicked yes. So, pretty good. I don't think anything else changed hands, and now we have an extra piece of land for the glorious empire. So, yes. Next up, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I don't remember. So, we'll find out next time. Thank you all for watching.